Guys, I'm coming today to say something brave and controversial and that nobody's said before, and I certainly have never said before, but like, A Song of Ice and Fire is really, really good. Hey nerds, what's up? Welcome to my reread of Clash of Kings discussion video, not really a review. Guys, this book is so good. And I need to tell you something kind of funny because I wrote down all my thoughts about my reread and I did like a little outline of what I wanted to talk about today. And then after I did all that, I went and watched my old Clash video, which I've never done. Like I've never rewatched it after I made it. And it turns out I started that video the exact same way I had written to start this video. Guys, this book was so good. So I need to personally restate, George R.R. Martin is just such a good writer. His prose is so good. But guys, my mind was newly blown by the prose in this book. I'm like, I've rated books really well this year, but have I actually read anything good? That's how George R.R. Martin's prose makes me feel in Clash of Kings. It's just so good. It was actually really hard for me when I was reading it, not just to keep marking favorite passages. Like I was like, my review can't just be me coming here and reading hundreds of pages of Clash of Kings just because I like it. I have to have something to say. Anyway, going into Clash of Kings, I thought that this would, my theory, I guess it's a theory I can't prove yet, but my theory was of Clash of Kings that it would be the book most improved by a reread for me. Now, that's not saying a lot considering I already gave it a 4.5. Like all these series have 4.5 and 5 stars. It's not like it needed to improve, but I remember thinking when I finished the series that when I read Clash of Kings at the time, I clearly loved it. You can go watch my original gushing review, but I remember how I felt while I was reading it, which was like slightly overwhelmed. I remember feeling like so many more character names were thrown at you and so much politics was happening in a way that I didn't always fully comprehend. And so when I went into Clash, I was super excited because I felt like, well, I know all that stuff now. I know the plot. I'm so much more acquainted with the characters. I bet it will be way easier for me to parse. And that was totally true. Like, I think it really let Martin's amazing writing and prose shine even more because I wasn't stressed reading it. I wasn't worried about the outcome because I already know what is happening. I got to focus more on the little things because my brain didn't have to be taken up so much by the plot and getting to know the characters. It's kind of funny, like I also just, I feel guilty after this reread because I did rank Clash of Kings 4 out of 5 in my book ranking and it just feels way too low for how good of a book this is, but I don't know how I could possibly rank it higher because it's like, it obviously can't go over A Storm of Swords. That's crazy. It can't go over Feast of Crows for me personally, because Feast of Crows is my favorite Song of Ice and Fire book. I think it's incredible. You know, it'll be really interesting. Maybe when I reread A Feast for Crows, like I'll put Clash about, no. We'll see. And then I have a really hard time putting it over a Game of Thrones. Like, in some ways, I think Clash of Kings is a better book than Game of Thrones, like especially on reread, realizing how much stuff is in there. But a Game of Thrones, I'm just such a sucker for a first book in a series when it's that good. And a Game of Thrones changed fantasy. Like Ned Stark's death changed fantasy. So it's hard for me to put Clash over that as well, just because of the emotions involved in reading a Game of Thrones. But like it deserves more, so maybe I just tie them all. Anyway, let's dive in with some thoughts I actually want to share. And just as a reminder, this video will be full spoilers for the whole series because it is a reread video. If you want to watch a video that is just a Clash of Kings, you would go to my first read through Clash of Kings video. But yeah, so just as a warning, I'm going to be talking about the full series. So the first thing I want to start with is Theon. And I bet you didn't think we were going to start with that, did ya? Here's the thing. Theon is still the worst. Like his inner monologue, jail. His actions, straight to jail. However, I think because I wasn't so focused on kind of learning who Theon was and his character and him being the worst, I just saw him in a different light this read through. And it really has nothing to do with what I know eventually happens to him. Like it's really separate from that. It was just all of a sudden, I saw Theon as a character who, wow, is just somebody who desperately wants to be loved. And the first Theon perspective we get, Theon 1, I remember the first time I read it, just like being caught up with how annoying he is. And I was so happy his dad put him in his place. I was like, ha, Theon, you're trying to be impressive and you failed. And this time I just read that chapter so differently. I read it as a boy desperately wanting approval and then not finding it anywhere. And it's like, I don't feel sorry for Theon because, like I said, he's kind of the worst. But also when you see it in that light, that scene is a little bit more heartbreaking with his dad and like how he gets dressed up and forgets that that's not how it's supposed to be. And you're like, what are these adults in his life wanting from him? You know, he gets sent off to be a hostage for 10 years. I think that's right. And it's like, so you've given him up. He had no choice. He had to assimilate into the Starks, but they probably, you know, there was that weird tension there. And so to get that kind of welcome, like it was more tinged with sadness on this read. And, you know I've mentioned in other videos that I eventually want to make a video, likely when I finish my reread, on loyalty in A Song of Ice and Fire, particularly focusing on Ned v. Tywin and how that plays out in the series, as they're both men who do inspire a lot of loyalty, but in very different ways, and how that plays out in the story. And also the idea of Stark versus Lannister and how Ned looms so large in the narrative, even though he's dead. And while I was thinking about that during this reread, all of a sudden something clicked into place that I had never noticed before, which is the glaring similarities between Jon and Theon and how they actually work as complete foils of each other in the story. And once I noticed it, I literally couldn't think of anything else through the whole story. They have so many similarities, yet choose such different paths in life. They both are in the Stark home in a way that isn't quite belonging. Now, obviously they're in different ways. You have Jon there as the bastard and Theon there as a hostage. So because of that, obviously, Jon is going to get a lot more love and care from Ned in terms of being his nephew of a beloved sister, right? He is going to take care of Jon because that was his sister's dying wish to him. And Theon isn't going to get that same treatment from Ned as he is a hostage. That said, like, I'm sure Theon was treated a lot better by Catelyn than Jon was. So even though they're not exactly the same, I think they both keep the same place in the Stark household in some ways as being outsiders that are supposed to belong but don't quite. And I kept noticing how they both constantly thought of Ned with such different outcomes. I'm gonna read a couple examples. So this first one's a Jon scene. My father, he hesitated. Go on, Jon, say what you would say. My father once told me that some men are not worth having, Jon finished. A bannerman who is brutal or unjust dishonors his liege lord as well as himself. That's just one example of the way that Jon tries to emulate Ned and thinks of his wisdom. And then we have a couple times of Theon thinking of Ned and his wisdom as well. Theon thought of seeking out the bodies of the two men he'd slain himself to see if they had any jewelry worth taking, but the notion left a bitter taste in his mouth. He could imagine what Eddard Stark would have said, yet that thought made him angry too. Stark is dead and rotting, and not to me, he reminded himself. Smiths have strong arms and weak hands, observed Theon, but if the rest of you serve me as loyally as you serve Ned Stark, you'll find me as generous a lord as you could want. Theon told himself he must be as cold and deliberate as Lord Eddard. Those are just a couple examples. There's more that I'll use later for different things. It was very interesting seeing the different ways that Jon and Theon looked up to Ned. And again, I understand that Jon thinks Ned is his dad. Like, I understand that. But Jon seems to really want to understand how to be like Ned, whereas Theon seems to want Ned's power without understanding how he gained it. Jon, who could have easily had just as much resentment for Ned and for being a bastard, could think similarly to the way Theon does, but doesn't. And it really kind of, I think, maybe comes down to their personality, that Jon has so much humility and Theon does not. Theon feels that everyone owes him something and has this sense of grandeur. Jon focuses on trying to be the best person he can be and living up to Ned's legacy, whereas Theon really feels like he deserves something because of how he was born. And obviously Jon is born in different circumstances, so I understand why that's the case, but it's so interesting to see how they chose different paths for themselves when they could have chosen, either of them could have chosen the other's path. And so many interesting scenes are literally one-to-one with Jon and Theon once you recognize it. One of my very favorites is when they're both confronted with killing somebody. Longclaw was not so long or heavy a sword as his father's ice, but it was Valyrian steel all the same. He touched the edge of the blade to mark where the blow must fall, and Ygritte shivered. That's cold, she said. Go on, be quick about it. He raised Longclaw over his head, both hands tight around the grip. One cut with all my weight behind it. He could give her a quick, clean death at least. He was his father's son. Wasn't he? wasn't he? Jon lowered his sword. Go, he muttered. Now compare that to Theon killing Farlan. As he knelt to the block, the kennel master said, "My Lord Eddard always did his own killings." Theon had to take the axe himself or look a weakling. His hands were sweating, so the shaft twisted in his grip as he swung, and the first blow landed between Farlan's shoulders. It took 3 more cuts to hack through all the bone and muscle and sever the head from the body. And afterward, he was sick, remembering all the times they'd sat over a cup of mead and talking of hounds and hunting. I had no choice, he wanted to scream at the corpse. The Ironborn can't keep secrets. They had to die, and someone had to take the blame for it. He only wished he had killed him cleaner. Ned Stark had never needed more than a single blow to take a man's head. These scenes happen in almost back-to-back chapters, by the way. There's just a quick Sansa chapter in between them. And it's like, you see here how Jon has internalized all the right lessons from Ned because he wants to be Ned and be worthy of being a Stark, whereas Theon wants Ned's power and influence without any understanding of how he achieved it. I also particularly love the scene where Theon is contemplating taking the black when that's offered to him. I was going to read it, but it's like I've already read too much. But in that contemplation, he's like, oh, that wouldn't be so bad. I could become Lord Commander. And that scene hits so differently now on a reread, knowing that Jon does become Lord Commander. And it's like, it again shows how they are such good foils of each other, because Jon goes to take the black and he doesn't want to. He's not excited about it. All of Game of Thrones is about that. But he has so much humility and is trying to live up to being the best person he can be. And through doing that, he becomes Lord Commander. Whereas Theon, the minute he is offered that he could potentially take the black, already has the thought like, well, I could become Lord Commander. Like, why wouldn't I? And it just shows like the differences in their personalities in such a stark way. Once you know, no pun intended, once you know where Jon ends up. And honestly, once you know where Theon ends up, like how they are diverging so much, when in the beginning it feels like Theon should have so much more than Jon. And I think this is extra interesting with the layer that neither of them are actually Ned's sons. Obviously, Jon believes himself to be Ned's son, so that does make it different, but it is kind of interesting. Neither of them are. And I love how that shows the idea of loyalty and what makes honor in their individual decisions, and seeing that symmetry in their character arcs really deepened their arcs for me. And I always love seeing the loyalty Ned is shown, even with people who didn't like him. Like there's a scene where Stannis is like, I'm sorry about Ned, even though he was never on my side. And there's a scene where Catelyn says, on my honor, let's see, I actually have it. More angry men would be busting in on them any instant, she knew. She's innocent, Robar. You have my word on my husband's grave and on my honor as a Stark. That resolved him. I will hold them, Sir Robar said. Get her away. He turned and went out. And as I was reading all those examples of people still being loyal to Ned, it made me realize that Jon really is the one carrying that Stark banner. He's the one that I feel like in the series, when you think about it, is really inspiring that kind of loyalty that Ned did through who he is, which is kind of cool. And along that same line, something I noticed is the siblings all talk about each other quite a bit in their internal monologues throughout the entire book. And it's very interesting because almost no one, I'm trying to decide if Sansa mentions him, I don't know, but all the other siblings never mention Theon, but they always mention Jon in the same breath. And again, I know there's slightly difference there, but like Theon was raised hunting next to Robb, like being with the kids just as much, but everyone thinks fondly of Jon and not really Theon. Again, down to like our personal choices and what we choose to make of our circumstances. Anyway, that whole thing kind of reframed my thoughts around Ned's legacy and honor and who is really carrying that torch as we move forward. Because I do think in some ways every Stark does, like a little bits of their story, but I just saw it so much in the comparison of those two characters. And this really got me thinking of another theme I love in A Song of Ice and Fire, which is identity, and really thinking about the idea of the stories we tell ourselves. And that might be fresh on my mind because I'm also reading a Ken Liu book. He's another one of my favorite authors, and he covers that theme a lot, the stories we tell ourselves. And so I was thinking of that, and also thinking about how I've previously talked about identity and names. And I love the theme of identity and names. And I don't know if I said this when it was probably my Song of Swords, Storm of Swords or Feast for Crows, talking about the Starks losing their names and talking about Sansa and Arya losing their names. But what I didn't realize is that it starts in Clash of Kings for Arya. I don't think I really noticed that as a theme until later, but in I was seeing like, oh, Arya goes to Aerie and then goes to Weasel and then goes to Nan. And that idea of her shifting identities with her name and losing her Starkness starts a lot earlier than I remembered. And with Jon and Theon, they also are telling themselves different stories. They are also making their lives based on different things that they believe about themselves. Jon desperately doesn't want to be a Snow and wants to be a Stark. Theon does not know, doesn't know what he wants to be. He is stuck between being a Stark and a Greyjoy. And actually, even just rereading Clash made me appreciate that Theon scene that I watched just recently from Game of Thrones. Like, even though I was being a hater in the moment, it was like, that is a really satisfying ending for Theon. The answer of, you didn't have to choose, you can be both. Whatever else the creators did, I do think that is a satisfying ending to that theme of identity for Theon. And of course, along that, we also get the first glimpse of Reek in this novel, which will become a very important identity to Theon as well. So I just like that I saw all those identity pieces starting in Clash, when before I don't think I really noticed them to the next book. I do want to talk a little bit about Arya and Sansa, but Arya's scenes are so freaking good in Clash. And now I know that I also said that in my first video, but like, they just hit, you know what I mean? Everything just hits. I did want to circle back on this, particularly because I did read the scene this time that I skipped the first time I read Clash of Kings. Why do I forget his character name? Who's telling a gross story? Whatever, doesn't matter, he gets killed. I do understand why Kyle told me to skip it the first time. I think I was in a more fragile space with A Song of Ice and Fire and how common assault was used. I think now that I have read the whole series, I felt like I understood its place in the series better, and I don't feel like I'm going to be as sensitive to it, so I chose to just read through. It is a really gross story. It wasn't as graphic as I was expecting, so I think it was fine. I will say I'm very glad I read the story because it does make Arya immediately calling for his death that much stronger. Like, even though that scene obviously was amazing when I first read it, it hit a lot harder reading through it. So that kind of was fun. No, that's not the right word. It was interesting because I'd read that for the first time. It did change the scene for me. So that was the one scene that really felt changed because it was new and it did give even extra context to Arya choosing that, even though I could have done it by context clues. I hope that makes sense. Then I just really want to be like, free Sansa. If you don't follow me on Instagram, a few days ago when I was like halfway through my Clash reread, I just posted free Sansa to my stories with literally no context. I did not say like, I just said free Sansa. Guys, I know my Sansa video was mostly about book one because I feel like that's mostly where people complain about Sansa. But if you are a Sansa hater after book one, just miss me with it. Miss me with your bad takes because Sansa goes through so much. Like, her getting beaten by Joffrey and all of her inner monologue is so sad. The other thing, actually, I'll tell you why I posted free Sansa. If you want to know like the specific scene I posted free Sansa in, it was actually a Theon perspective because I didn't even realize in Clash, like, everybody wants Sansa and it's just free my girl. Like, you have the Hound, who's kind of gross and creepy with her, which, by the way, I love the Hound. That's not me saying I don't love the Hound, but he like is kind of creepy and like kind of implies like he's trying to kiss her. And then Dantos tries to kiss her. And then Theon in his head thinks about, well, I could marry Sansa. She's cute. And like Joffrey, it's just so gross. And that's not even counting. Like, I know what's coming. I know what Tyrion's thoughts are going to be. And I freaking know Peter Baelish is coming for me. I just feel so sorry for her. And if you're someone who's like, don't you feel so sorry for Theon after he goes through all the Reek stuff? If you're someone who says that and doesn't ever feel sorry for Sansa, we don't need to know each other. Anyway, I just feel like a lot of people do Sansa versus Arya, and I thought of it in a new way as I was reading this novel. Once again, just wanted to emphasize how brave Sansa is the whole book, how she has to keep so much composure, and how brave she is in the face of like all of that. And also Cersei being like, yeah, Sir Island's here to chop off your head if the city gets taken because we're going down together. Scary. And then for her to still get up and be poised and think like, I want them to love me if I'm ever going to be a queen, and trying to cheer everyone up when Cersei flees. When she flees. What was I? Anyway, so brave to go through all that. and just how Arya is also brave in just such a different way. But I think it, once again, and I already said this, but because Arya is more of the stabby type of brave, people don't recognize how similar their narratives are. There's this great scene, here I marked it. He was going to take me home, she thought, as they dug the old man's hole. There were too many dead to bury them all, but Yoren at least must have a grave, Arya had insisted. He was going to bring me safe to Winterfell. He promised. Part of her wanted to cry, the other part wanted to kick him. I love that because I feel like sometimes, and I wonder if this is like especially a result of the show where it's just like harder to have those kind of nuanced character moments, but boil Arya down to just like this tough person when inside she has many of the same thoughts as Sansa. They both are constantly thinking about how much they want to go back to Winterfell. And I think Arya, the differences between these characters is that I think Sansa tends to accept those emotions as they come and Arya buries them. And that creates differences in their character that are very interesting. And I just think that what makes Arya such a great character that is not that typical fighting type of strong female character is her internal monologue and how she deals with things, because you see her get these emotions that are very similar to Sansa, but instead of letting her feel them, she immediately rejects them. And I think we see as that how that affects her entire journey. And I just kind of noticed it more this time around. I also just thought a lot of stuff about Catelyn, but I'm gonna spare you guys. I realized my initial Catelyn rant was in my original Clash of Kings videos, so I don't need to retread it, but just know I feel the same way on a reread. I'm still defending my girl. She's mine. Okay, next I want to talk about religion in A Song of Ice and Fire, because I already did an entire video on religion, but I feel like I missed a few things. On my reread of Clash, a couple things really stuck out to me. Obviously, and I know I did talk about this before, I love the motif of the comet. I love how through the book, them seeing that red streak in the sky and how every character's perspective mentions it and reframes its meaning to be positive to them. And I don't know what video I talked about that, and hopefully it was my religion video about how that shows how we might interact with religion. And I noticed that in other ways as well. There's this awesome scene where Catelyn is praying in the sept. Behind her the torch spit, and suddenly it seemed to her that it was her sister's face on the wall, though the eyes were harder than she recalled, not Lysa's eyes, but Cersei's. Cersei is a mother too. No matter who fathered those children, she felt them kick inside her, brought them forth with her pain and blood, nursed them at her breast, if they are truly Jaime's. Does Cersei pray to you too, my lady? Catelyn asked the mother. For some reason that quote really hit me this time around. That Cat even has the thought, does Cersei pray to you too? I'm praying to the mother to protect my children, but the other side's doing that too. And how that relates back to the comment and just kind of a greater discussion of how religion plays out in A Song of Ice and Fire. I just noticed it more this time around and thought it was a really cool commentary on that sort of thing. Religion and magic have such a complicated relationship in A Song of Ice and Fire. It's really hard to tell what is just magic and what is religion, and do the gods exist? And another fantastic quote I did not remember comes from my Onion Knight. A troubled look crossed the king's face like a passing cloud. More like he planned some treachery. There will be no combat of champions. Sir Courtenay was dead before he ever threw that glove. The flames do not lie, Davos. Yet they require me to make them true, he thought. It had been a long time since Davos Seaworth felt so sad. Oh, I love that, but they require me to make them true. Anyway, I just really noticed how Clash really brings that push and pull of magic and religion and the various religions in the story, and how they might clash against each other really to the forefront in ways that maybe I hadn't discussed before, and so that stood out to me. Okay, let's talk about the House of the Undying. Obviously it was even more interesting this time around. Like, obviously it hit harder. I noticed some things like, yes, my poor baby Rob. That was him, huh? That's fine. I also noticed a lot more about Fagin because I obviously didn't know that character yet. And so it was kind of interesting immediately picking out the Mummer's dragon, the dragon raised on the sticks. And I don't know if this is anything, but like I noticed when they were talking about Rhaegar and Aegon and they talked about his eye color. And I feel like the eye color is kind of a thing in Dance with Dragons with Fagin. So I know some of that stuff. And that made it really interesting. Mostly I read that chapter so slowly. I kept reading every sentence like 2 times, trying to parse meaning. And I got some and not others. Here's the thing. I'm not a theory crafter. I tend to enjoy more the analysis after the fact. So I feel like you're not gonna get something new from me. You're gonna be like, people want me to tell me what you think of this sentence in House of the Undying. My brain isn't wired that way. I don't have anything for you. But I'll go watch some House of the Undying videos now. I didn't want to do it till I reread, but now I've decided like it's just not going to happen for me. You tell me whose I should go watch. I am sure Preston has one. Maybe Quinn the DM has one. You guys can go. You can't mention multiple. You give me one House of the Undying video I should go watch, and I will. Okay, I want to talk about some future foreshadowing that was fun. Actually, none of it's fun. So there's a lot of it. There was just a couple that were really significant to me personally. One was with Bran. Your notion about the bastard may have merit, Bran, Maester Luwin said after. One day you will be a good lord for Winterfell, I think. No, I won't. Bran knew he would never be a lord, no more than he could be a knight. Rob's to marry some Frey girl, you told me so yourself, and the Walders say the same. He'll have sons, and they'll be the lords of Winterfell after him, not me. It may be so, Bran, Sir Roderick said, but I was wed 3 times and my wives gave me daughters. Now only Beth remains to me. My brother Martin fathered 4 strong sons, yet only Jory lived to be a man. When he was slain, Martin's line died with him. When we speak of tomorrow, nothing is ever certain. This just has a lot. Obviously, if we believe that one of the things Martin told the showrunners is that Bran gets the Iron Throne, I do think this is kind of like a funny sentence to him thinking I won't even be a leader of Winterfell, but then he ends up ruling the 7 kingdoms. But also just the foreshadowing of you don't know what's going to happen. Rob might not have sons when really it's like Rob's not going to get married to a Frey girl and Rob's going to die. We don't know the future. Yeah, it just was really eerie this time around. She could see her reflection in the breastplate, gazing back at her as if from the bottom of a deep green pond. The face of a drowned woman, Caitlin thought. Can you drown in grief? I don't know if this was intentional from Martin, but I didn't like it. And then the last one, I actually guess I'm not going to read it, but it's when Tyrion is having all of his dreams and memories when he's really injured after the battle. And there's this whole scene where he's remembering things that happened with him and Tysha. And let me tell you, way worse on a reread, because when I first read this, I still thought Tysha, was fake and wasn't real, that she was just a prostitute, And so then when you reread this and how nice she was to him and that wasn't true, really a gut punch. So I guess that's not foreshadowing as much as just like understanding a story completely differently once you know the full context. Oh, and then the last thing, this isn't the future, it's the past, but I don't know where else to put it. It was nice knowing what a green apple fossaway was. I read Night of the Seven Kingdoms in between book 3 and 4, so now I'm like, oh, when they're talking about the red apple and green apple fossaways, I get it. So that was fun. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is actually beauty in A Song of Ice and Fire and the adaptation. For some reason this time, I think there was a specific page that I know I started thinking about this. Not that you need me to read all of these, but it's too bad. It's when Tyrion is making Shae safe and he gets Varys to have a bunch of ugly people and to guard her, so there's no competition. The others were his choice, a lot of mercenaries as ever graced a dungeon, each uglier than the last. When Varys had paraded them before him, Tyrion had been afraid he'd gone too far, but Shae had never uttered a word of complaint. And why would she? She has never complained of me, and I'm more hideous than all her guards together. Perhaps she does not even see ugliness. And I don't know why, but it was in that moment that I started thinking about how ugly Tyrion is in the books and how not ugly he is in the adaptation. Obviously, Peter Dinklage has dwarfism, which makes him look like slightly different than the average person. But otherwise, Peter Dinklage is a pretty good looking dude. And even, I was trying to look at pictures at late stage to make sure I was right. I was like, no, these are from later in the series. After the battle, at the end of this book, it basically says he's missing a whole chunk of his nose and his side of his face is destroyed. And already he had been described as pretty eyes, different colors and really crazy. And Peter Dinklage gets a cut, an aesthetic scar down the side of his face. And Tyrion is actually the one character I kind of imagined as their A Song of Ice and Fire counterpart the whole time I read, even though I had never seen the show, just because Peter Dinklage is such a famous person. I knew what he looked like. I've seen him in a lot of other things. And I realized that actually does quite change the connotation of Tyrion's character, because obviously him having dwarfism is going to cause a lot of prejudice in the books. That's not, but also it's being literally terrifying to look at. And I think that changes it. Like, because Peter Dinklage isn't terrifying to look at. And I think that changes how you view his character. And I was thinking that happens kind of a lot. And the other person I thought of was Brienne. Brienne in the show is a woman without makeup, essentially, and not someone that would be mocked so heavily being called a beauty because she's so ugly. And obviously that's just Hollywood, and every adaptation, like everyone has to be attractive in TV shows pretty much. But as I was thinking about that, it made me notice how much beauty and lack thereof is a thematic element in A Song of Ice and Fire, particularly with how it has nothing to do with someone's inner worlds. How beautiful or ugly they are. There are beautiful characters who are pure and wonderful inside, and beautiful characters who are terrible. There are hideously ugly characters who are doing their best and wonderful inside, and hideously ugly characters that are also terrible, and everything in between. And also made me start thinking about how disability is framed in A Song of Ice and Fire, and the grand ranges of people and who they are. And kind of like actually what a good representation of those things of like beauty and disability, and how so often we talk about in our media that they are used in wrong ways. Like, I know that this has been a criticism of Disney in particular, if we're talking about like children's cartoons, how villains have certain traits that are then seen as undesirable. Our heroes have certain traits to seen as desirable. And there's a lot of connotations there that we don't have time to get into. But just thinking like, oh, that is actually something that is discussed and put forward in the novels, and how we've also, I've read and listened to a lot of discussion about how disability or disfigurement can be projected as scary, especially in children's media, and that we should be afraid of people with that, even though their outward appearance really has nothing to do with their inner. And there's just so many complicated people when we talk about disfigurement or disability in A Song of Ice and Fire. Again, that has really nothing to do with their personalities or how good or bad they are. And I'm not a part of those communities, so I can't really speak for it, but I would love to find a video. There's got to be a creator out there. A Song of Ice and Fire is so big. I wonder if anyone's talked about that and what they've said about it, because from where I'm sitting, it feels like there's actually some pretty good representation and things to talk about in terms of how we view characters that would be just completely lost in the adaptation, only because Hollywood, and this is not just the show, literally everyone in Hollywood has to be attractive. Kind of interesting. Let's talk Renly and Stannis. I'm not gonna talk about them super long, but I will just say this quote hit different on a reread. The armorer considered that a moment. Robert was the true steel. Stannis is pure iron, black and hard and strong, yes, but brittle, the way iron gets. He'll break before he bends. And Renly, that one, he's copper, bright and shiny, pretty to look at, but not worth all that much at the end of the day. I recognize that as a good quote before we went, but now it just has more meaning since I know the characters better. And I will say this. I am not a fan of Stannis the Manus, but I feel like I understand him a little more this time around. I feel like I get him as a character a little more, so I really enjoyed his portions. It seems like this video is on track to being longer than my first one. But you know what, now I just know that A Song of Ice and Fire fans can handle it. You know what I mean? I now have a section called random quotes that I marked that I want to talk about. And I made sure I did not mark any of the same quotes as last time, because I did, because they hit well this time too. But I went and watched that video, and I'm only going to talk about the ones that hit me anew this time. We're gonna start fun before we get devastating. Tyrion smiled. Lord Varys, I am growing strangely fond of you. I may kill you yet, but I think I'd feel sad about it. I love that quote. I don't know. All the dialogue's so great. Every scene with Tyrion and Varys this time, all I could think about constantly was how good Martin is at writing dialogue, and also how fun Tyrion chapters are. I think I forgot because Tyrion and Dance, it's so sad. Tyrion is a very broken. I mean, you think he's broken, but no, he's not broken like he's broken in Dance. So going back to just like a little bit more of lighthearted Tyrion was a really nice experience. Because it will not last, Catelyn answered sadly. Because they are the nights of summer and winter is coming. I think that might be one of the best lines in the series. No notes. No, but you have courage. Not battle courage perhaps, but I don't know, a kind of woman's courage. And I think when the time comes, you will not try and hold me back. Promise me that you will not hold me back from Stannis. The tall girl knelt awkwardly, unsheathed Renly's long sword, and laid it at her feet. Then I am yours, my lady, your liege man, or whatever you would have me be. I will shield your back and keep your counsel and give my life to yours if need be. I swear it by the old gods and the new. So why did I start crying when I read that? I fully just teared up. I mean, when I was rereading, not this right now, but when I reread it the first time, I totally teared up. Side note, about Brienne. I already said, like, Tyrion's really the only actor that I imagine when I read the book. Otherwise, it's just kind of whoever I make up in my head. Even though I've seen a bunch of clips, nothing has really stuck in my head. However, on this read, I noticed Brienne's voice is now her actress's voice. I couldn't stop it. It just like, every time I read Brienne's quotes, it's just the actress's voice comes out of my head, which has never happened for any of the other characters. I just think she suddenly became my Brienne. Like, I imagine her voice. Kyle told me apparently she was basically like a fan cast, like the fans wanted her. And if so, you did a good job because she's the only one that has totally transformed mine. I can't remember how I used to imagine Brienne. It's just her. This other quote is more Brienne, I'm sorry, but it's great. Bryce Caron walked his horse forward a few paces, his long rainbow-striped cloak twisting in the wind off the bay. No man here is a turncloak, sir. My fealty belongs to Storm's End, and King Stannis is its rightful lord, and our true king. He is the last of House Baratheon, Robert's heir, and Renly's. If that is so, why is the Knight of Flowers not among you? And where is Mathis Rowan, Randall Tarley, Lady Oakheart? Why are they not here in your company, they who loved Renly best? Where is Brienne of Tarth, I ask of you? I don't know why. That just like hit me so hard. Where is Brienne? Again, I love the theme of loyalty. Love it. Beyond, the tops of the keeps and towers still stood as they had for hundreds of years, and it was hard to tell that the castle had been sacked and burned at all. The stone is strong, Bran told himself. The roots of the trees go deep, and under the ground the kings of winter sit their thrones. So long as those remained, Winterfell remained. It was not dead, just broken. Like me, he thought, I'm not dead either. That is an absolutely insane way to end a novel. It's such a good line. Do you think the last sentence of the series was going to be from Bran? Food for thought. I know why I immediately started A Storm of Swords after finishing that sentence. Has a book ever ended better? I don't know. That was my very long reread thoughts. Please let me know what you think. It's really nice when you read a book that you've told people is one of your favorites. Like, I have become known as A Song of Ice and Fire fanatic, and then you reread it and you're like, I was so right. Look at me having correct opinions. It's so good. And what's crazy to me is I know the next two books I liked better. So I just can't even imagine how they are going to hit on a reread. There's just gonna be so much. Yep, okay. Thanks for still sticking around for the Song of Ice and Fire journey. Tell me your thoughts below. And as always, if you like these kind of videos, please like and subscribe. That's the best way to support me. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading, as well as other nerdy rants, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.